Part 1. The birthday that wasn't. They say your 30th birthday is supposed to be a milestone, a time for celebration, reflection, maybe even a little champagne. But for Elena Harper, it was the day her life shattered like glass under a boot heel. She came home with a soft smile and a small vanilla cake she'd bought for herself. No balloons. No party. No one waiting at the door with hugs or laughter. Just silence. Heavy. Cold. Almost surgical in its precision. It was raining that day in Marlow Hills, Oregon. The kind of rain that didn't just soak through your clothes, but sank into your bones. Like the sky itself was mourning something. Elena's shoes squelched as she stepped into the foyer of the house she had lived in since she was 7. She was drenched, carrying groceries in one hand, her own birthday cake in the other. She looked around, half expecting anyone to jump out and say, "Surprise!" But instead she saw it. A suitcase. Packed. Sitting neatly by the front door. She blinked. Once. Twice. No, it wasn't a dream. It wasn't a joke. The zipper was pulled tight, the handle propped up, ready to be wheeled away. Her suitcase. Her clothes. And then came the voice. "Elena," said her father, Mark, standing in the living room with his arms crossed. "It's time you left." Just like that. No happy birthday. No warm welcome. No cake or candles. Just a sentence delivered like a bullet to the chest. She laughed at first. A small shaky chuckle. "You're kidding, right?" But Mark didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. His eyes were steel. And beside him, her mother Diana sat on the couch like a statue. Eyes fixed on the blank TV screen, face devoid of expression. "You're 30, Mark continued. "No more freeloaders." The word hit her like a slap. Freeloader. Her mouth opened to protest, but nothing came out. She glanced at her mother, hoping, praying for some kind of signal. A flicker of compassion. A defense. But Diana didn't move. Her shoulders were hunched, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. There was shame there, yes, but not enough to stop what was happening. "You've had long enough," Mark added. "You need to learn how the real world works." A birthday gift wrapped in cruelty. And it didn't feel random. It felt orchestrated, planned, calculated down to the date, her 30th birthday, as if it were a deadline circled on their mental calendar. Elena looked at the meatloaf on the table, the mashed potatoes, the green beans. Dinner was ready, like nothing was wrong, like they hadn't just lit a match and set fire to her entire sense of security. "I pay the internet," she muttered. "I paid for your eye surgery last year. I cover the electricity. I've helped with groceries. I paid for the—" "That's not the point," Mark cut in, his voice rising like a growl. "You're still here in this house, living under our roof. And that ends tonight." He twisted the knife. "You're not a princess anymore." The word princess, once her childhood nickname, once said with affection, now hissed through his teeth like venom. Diana still didn't speak. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. Elena stared at her mother for a long moment, as if begging her to say something. Anything. But all she got was silence. Thick. Suffocating. And then, like a curtain lifting, everything made sense. The cold shoulders. The increasing passive-aggressive remarks. The jokes about rent and adulthood. The way Diana stopped asking how her day was. How Mark had started slamming doors when she got home late from work. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. It was premeditated, meticulously planned, and they waited until her birthday to pull the trigger. "So you packed my bags," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. No one answered. She looked at the cake in her hand. It had been a silly little thing, picked up from the grocery store bakery. White frosting, pink cursive letters. "Happy 30th, Elena." The top had started to smudge from the rain. It slipped from her hand and landed on the kitchen counter with a soft thud. No one moved to help her. No one said a word. And just when she thought it couldn't get colder, Mark muttered without looking up from the TV remote, "Don't forget to turn off the lights when you leave. You're not paying for them anymore." Elena stood frozen in the doorway of the dining room, heart pounding so loud she could hear it echo in her ears. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. She couldn't believe it, couldn't feel it. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But there was no point. These people, her parents, had already made up their minds. And worse, they'd made her the villain in their story. In their eyes, she wasn't a daughter anymore. She was an inconvenience, a burden, a grown child who had overstayed her welcome. And as the rain continued to fall against the windows, she realized the truth, brutal and impossible to ignore. This wasn't a home. It hadn't been for years. She walked to the door slowly, like she was moving through molasses. Her hand brushed the handle of the suitcase. 30 years. 30 years of being the good daughter. The reliable one. The one who stayed. Who helped. Who gave and gave and gave. And this was how it ended. No hug. No goodbye. Just silence. And the sound of her own heart breaking. Used and discarded. When Elena stepped outside that night, suitcase trailing behind her like a shadow, the rain didn't feel cold anymore. It felt clarifying. Cleansing. Her shoes soaked through. Her fingers numbed. But it was the ache in her chest that threatened to shatter her. She walked aimlessly for blocks, past flickering street lamps and shuttered shops, unsure where she was going. She wasn't thinking. She was remembering. Rewinding. Trying to make sense of the senseless. How had it come to this? They called her a freeloader. But that couldn't be further from the truth. For the past 7 years, Elena had been the only one keeping that house alive. Quietly. Consistently. Out of guilt, out of love. Out of the warped sense of duty her parents had baked into her bones since she was a teenager. It started small. She got her first job at a cafe at 17. Mark was between gigs again. The power bill was overdue. Diana cried in the kitchen. So Elena used her paycheck, all of it, to keep the lights on. No one said thank you. They just expected it again the next month. And the next. And the next. By 21, she was paying for groceries. By 23, she was covering the internet and cell phone bills. When Mark cracked the hallway mirror in a drunken fit and injured his eye, Elena paid for the surgery, not because he asked, but because no one else had the credit to get approved. When Diana's car spun out on a rainy day, bald tires again, Elena paid for the new ones, and the tow and the mechanic fees. She drained her savings account without hesitation. When the roof started leaking during a November storm, Elena climbed up there herself. In the cold. In the pouring rain. One foot slipping on the wet shingles while Mark sat inside the living room with a beer and a football game. The next day, Diana told a neighbor, "Elena's such a good girl. She doesn't mind helping out." But she did mind. She minded every time she heard that phrase, "good girl." Used like a leash, a muzzle. A tool to keep her obedient. Grateful. Quiet. And for the longest time she believed it. She convinced herself that this was what being a good daughter looked like. That sacrifice was love. That love meant giving no matter what. But what she didn't realize was that she wasn't a daughter anymore. She was a resource. A living, breathing utility. She remembered the birthday 3 years ago when she didn't even get a card. Not even a text. But Diana did call her from the grocery store to ask if she could cover the total real quick. "Just $142. I'll pay you back tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. She remembered the time Mark lost his temper at a neighbor's barbecue, calling her moody, ungrateful, and just lucky we still let her live at home. She remembered how Diana laughed. They were planting the seeds for this eviction years ago. And she didn't see it coming. Not because she was blind, but because she refused to believe that the people who raised her, fed her, dressed her, hugged her as a child, could ever be so calculated in their cruelty. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the sticky note she'd scribbled on at work weeks earlier. "Pick up cake. Smile even if it's awkward. Pretend they forgot last year." God, she had even planned her forgiveness in advance. That's how hopeful she was. That's how desperate she was to be seen. She stopped walking. It hit her like a freight train. She hadn't been living with them, she had been sponsoring them. Every bill she paid. Every repair she funded. Every silent sacrifice they never acknowledged. It wasn't kindness. It was exploitation wrapped in a thin, poisonous thread called family loyalty. And the irony? The very night they called her a freeloader, she had walked in the door with dinner ingredients and a birthday cake, paid with her own money, cooked with her own hands, meant for them. She wanted so badly to believe she was loved. But what she'd been was useful. Until she wasn't. Until she turned 30. until they decided she'd outlived her purpose. And that's when the real betrayal revealed itself. They didn't wait until a fight. They didn't wait until she slipped up. They waited for her birthday. That wasn't an accident. It was a message. You were never worth celebrating. She stood beneath a streetlight, shivering, heart racing. Suddenly, the suitcase handle in her hand felt heavier. Not just with clothes, but with the years of weight she'd carried for them. Financial, emotional, physical. And now she was expected to walk away alone into the night and still believe she was the problem. But something shifted in her then. A cold, defiant voice whispered in the back of her mind. What if you stop giving? Just for once? What if you let them feel the silence you've endured for years? Her tears dried before they reached her chin. She pulled out her phone. And without thinking, without fear, she opened her banking app. She wasn't crying anymore. She was calculating. The quiet storm. Elena didn't scream. She didn't call them names, didn't throw things, didn't even text her friends to rage about the injustice. Instead, she booked a rideshare, climbed into the back seat without a word, and told the driver to take her to Jasmine's apartment on the other side of town. She stared out the window as the rain streaked down the glass, her reflection a ghost of who she was just hours ago. Inside her chest, the anger boiled, but it didn't spill over. No, it simmered. Controlled, contained, weaponized. By the time she arrived at Jasmine's place, her plan had already begun to form. Not out of revenge, not out of pettiness, out of survival. She stepped inside, dripping wet, and Jasmine, bless her soul, didn't ask a single question. She just wrapped Elena in a blanket and handed her a cup of tea. No judgment, no noise, just quiet warmth. And in that silence, Elena opened her laptop. She started with the utilities. The electric bill, the gas, the water, all registered in her name. Her mother had once insisted it was just for convenience, until we can afford to switch things over. But they never did. Click. She logged into each account one by one. Click. She disabled automatic payments. Click. She removed her bank info. Click. She requested service cancellations. Effective immediately. Each cancellation email that pinged into her inbox felt like an exhale she'd been holding for a decade. Then she moved to the joint savings account, the so-called emergency fund Diana guilt-tripped her into creating when Mark lost his job 5 years ago. Elena had been the only one contributing to it since the beginning. Thousands of dollars, hers, just sitting there waiting to be drained the next time they made a mess they couldn't fix. Click. She transferred every last cent into her private savings. Click. She froze the joint account, locking it behind security protocols that would take weeks and stacks of paperwork to undo. Then came the cable and internet, the holy lifelines of Mark's football obsession and Diana's daytime soaps. Click. Gone. She didn't stop there. Mark's truck and Diana's SUV were still listed under her auto insurance policy. She had added them years ago, thinking it would help them lower their premium. Instead, it became another silent burden she shouldered alone. Click. Removed. She opened a blank page in her Notes app. Not because she needed reminders, but because she wanted documentation. A record. A digital scar map of every step she took that night. Not out of fear they'd accuse her, but to remind herself, this wasn't vengeance. It was freedom. Freedom from gaslighting, from guilt, from being made to feel like her existence came with a debt she could never repay. She paused for a moment. The room was silent, except for the hum of her laptop. And then, a final deliberate decision. She opened the email tab, typed her parents' address into the to field. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Should she explain? Should she tell them why? Should she remind them of the surgeries, the tire changes, the roof repairs, the mortgage checks, the holidays she skipped with friends because Diana needed extra help with dinner? No. She closed the email. They didn't deserve an explanation. Not after the silence they gave her. Not after throwing her out like a bag of trash on her birthday. They didn't deserve her voice. They deserved the silence they had taught her to endure. It was 3:12 a.m. when she finally closed her laptop. Jasmine was asleep on the couch, curled under a blanket. The rain had softened to a whisper outside. Elena sat motionless at the kitchen table, staring into the dark, her hands still shaking, but her heart steady. And for the first time in years she felt it. Control. Not the illusion of it. Not the fake kind that came from doing everything right just to avoid a fight. Real control. The kind that came from finally saying no, even if no one heard it out loud. She whispered to herself, I forfeited everything I gave, and I'm not asking for anything back. It wasn't just a thought. It was a promise. She wasn't going to explain herself. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to play the dutiful daughter one more second. She was done feeding the wolves and pretending they were family. The next morning her phone exploded. 16 missed calls. 9 voicemails. Over a dozen texts. The first one was from Mark. You've got some nerve pulling this sh*t. You'll regret it. Then Diana. Honey, please. There's been a mistake. We didn't mean for you to feel abandoned. The internet's not working, and the fridge is off. Please call me. We're still your parents. The irony made her laugh out loud. A dry, bitter laugh. Last night she was a freeloader. But today, with no lights and no Wi-Fi, suddenly she was family again. Then came the message from Liam, her cousin. Yo. Heard from Aunt Diana. Dad's yelling. Lights are off. Internet's down. Your mom's crying. You okay? She replied with one sentence. I'm free. The morning panic. At 9:04 a.m. Elena's phone buzzed again. This time it was a FaceTime request. From her mother. She didn't answer. A minute later a text came through. Diana. Elena. Please. I just need to talk to you. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. I'm sorry. That word. Sorry. The same one Diana had used when she forgot Elena's graduation. The same one she whispered when Mark slapped the table so hard the plates shattered, and no one said anything. The same one she used when she took Elena's savings to buy herself a spa retreat. Because my mental health matters too, sweetie. Sorry was empty. Just a band-aid over a gunshot wound. Elena turned the phone face down and walked to the window. The city was bustling. People rushing to work, to brunch, to lives that weren't falling apart. But somewhere in the suburbs, her parents were sitting in a dark house with no internet, no heating, no safety net. And for the first time in years, no control. It was hard to feel bad. Until she did. Because guilt is a shapeshifter. It doesn't knock. It slips under the door. It wears the face of your mother. It sounds like your father saying, we gave you everything. It dances in your chest like a funeral dirge wrapped in lullabies. She told herself, they threw me out. And still her heart ached. By noon the guilt turned into pressure. Her aunt called. Then her uncle. Then even her boss, who said Diana had reached out on LinkedIn asking if Elena was okay. This wasn't concern. It was damage control. And Elena knew why. Because behind Diana's sweet texts and teary voice notes was panic. Not over Elena's well-being. Over reputation. What would the church group think if they found out the daughter who always helped organize bake sales was suddenly living on a friend's couch? What would the neighbors say when they noticed the power outage and started asking questions? What would Diana's friends whisper behind her back when they saw her posts suddenly go silent? This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about optics. At 3:17 p.m., a knock came at Jasmine's door. Elena froze. Another knock. Firmer. Slower. Measured. She opened the door a crack, and there he was. Mark. Still in his stained polo shirt. Hair disheveled. Eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep or too much whiskey, probably both. He didn't ask permission to come in. He just pushed the door open and stepped into the apartment like it was his right. You think this is funny? His voice was quiet but dangerous. The kind that comes just before the storm. Jasmine stood up from the couch. You need to leave. No. She needs to listen. He turned back to Elena, who hadn't moved. You embarrassed your mother. You humiliated this family. You think you're better than us now. She swallowed hard. Her voice when it came was calm. You kicked me out. You were being disrespectful. You told me to leave. Because you had an attitude, Elena. You always act like you're above everyone. Like we're a burden. She looked him dead in the eye. You are. Silence. It cracked through the room like lightning. Mark took a step forward. Jasmine blocked him. Touch her and I'll call the cops, Jasmine said, her voice shaking but steady. He backed off, hands raised mockingly. Fine. You want to play victim? You want to act like we never helped you, never fed you, never put a roof over your head? Go ahead. Just remember this day when the world turns on you. He turned to leave. But Elena wasn't finished. I remember everything. He paused. I remember watching you scream at Mom while she cried in the corner. I remember finding bruises on her arms and hearing her say it was just stress. I remember giving up my college dream so you could buy a truck you couldn't afford. I remember all of it. Mark didn't look back. He just slammed the door behind him. The walls shook. That night, Jasmine made spaghetti and they sat in silence. Elena stared at her plate, unable to eat. She should have felt triumphant, empowered, liberated. But freedom is never that clean. Freedom is bloody. Comes with mourning. It comes with the loss of people who never truly loved you but wore the mask well. And now she had to grieve that loss. Not just of parents but of the hope they might change. Of the fantasy that one day, they'd hold her face and say, "We're proud of you." That fantasy was dead, buried, burned. And yet the ashes still clung to her skin. She whispered into the quiet, "What if I'm the villain now?" Jasmine looked up, her voice soft. "You're not the villain. You're just the first one brave enough to break the cycle." Echoes. For the first time in years, Elena woke up to silence. No footsteps pacing down the hallway. No TV blaring conservative talk shows at max volume. No passive-aggressive sighs from the kitchen. Just quiet. It should have felt peaceful. But it didn't. The silence was too thick. Like walking through fog that clings to your skin and whispers, "This isn't over." She lay on the futon, staring at the ceiling, paralyzed by the weight of absence. Because when you've lived your whole life surviving chaos, peace feels unnatural. Like standing on still water, waiting for the monster to rise. By week 2, Elena tried to build a new rhythm. She updated her resume, applied for jobs, went to a few interviews wearing Jasmine's borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit. She tried journaling like the therapist on YouTube recommended. But every time her pen touched the paper, it froze. How do you explain trauma when it's woven into your DNA? How do you write, "I'm healing," when your heart still flinches at the sound of footsteps? She forced herself to write anyway. "Today I didn't cry." A small victory, but a real one. Then came the voicemails. From a blocked number. "Elena, honey. Mom. Please call me. I just want to hear your voice. Your father's not doing well. He's not sleeping. I'm not sleeping. We miss you. You've made your point. Okay. You're strong. You're independent. But enough is enough. Do you even care what this is doing to us? To our marriage." That last one stung. To their marriage? As if her silence was what was killing them. Not the years of screaming, gaslighting, or physical threats. It was her fault now. The echoes of manipulation still knew how to find her. One night, Jasmine invited a few friends over. Laughter filled the apartment, warm, raw, free. Elena tried to join in, sipping her wine, smiling at stories she didn't quite follow. But something was always out of sync. One of the girls, Cleo, asked innocently, "Where's your family from, Elena?" The wine burned her throat. She smiled too tightly. "They're local. But we don't talk." An awkward pause. A nod. The subject changed. But Elena's heart kept racing. Because it was easier to lie than to explain what it meant to grow up in a home where love was conditional. Where silence was currency and affection came with a receipt. That night she had a dream. She was 5 years old again. Standing in the kitchen, holding a picture she had drawn of her family. Stick figures. Smiling faces. A son in the corner. She showed it to her father, beaming. He looked at it. Then crumpled it. "You can do better than this crap." She woke up gasping. Her chest tight. Her hands trembling. Because trauma doesn't care if it's been weeks or decades. It lingers. It haunts. And it knows where your wounds live. The next morning she went outside. No destination. Just walking. It started to rain, light at first, then heavier, soaking her clothes, matting her hair. But she kept walking. Past busy streets. Past bus stops. Past rows of strangers with umbrellas. She ended up at a park. Empty. Gray. Cold. She sat on a wet bench and whispered, "Why do I still love them?" No one answered. Of course not. The sky just wept with her. A woman walked by with a child. The child tripped on the pavement and burst into tears. The mother picked her up gently, brushing dirt from her knees, whispering, "It's okay, baby. You're safe. I'm here." Elena watched them. Envy crawled up her spine, not because of the child, but because she had never known what that felt like. To fall, to break, and have someone catch you, without blame, without strings, without using your wounds as weapons. That night she made a choice. She opened her laptop, created a new document, title, "The Version of Me You Never Saw," and she began to write. Not for them, but for herself. She wrote about the birthday she spent alone in the garage because they forgot. She wrote about the night she found her mother crying in the bathtub, whispering, "Don't tell him. He'll get worse." She wrote about the day she realized survival wasn't love. And as she wrote, something cracked open inside her. Not pain, not rage, not even grief, but space. Room for something new. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but truth. And sometimes that's the first seed of freedom. The confrontation. The apartment was quiet when Elena left. No goodbye note. No explanation. Just her phone, a small purse, and the words she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her head. She didn't know exactly what she would say, only that she had to say it. It had been 2 months since she walked out that door. But the weight of everything left unsaid still clung to her bones like frostbite. Every night, she heard her mother's voice in her head, soft but sharp. "You always exaggerate. Stop being dramatic. We did the best we could." And maybe they did. But their best nearly killed her. She stood at the front gate of the old house. Familiar. Too familiar. Same cracked steps. Same half-dead rose bush her mother insisted on keeping alive. She knocked. Her hand trembled. Footsteps. A pause. Then the door creaked open. There she was. Her mother. Shorter than she remembered. More tired. Eyes wide with disbelief, then guilt, then something else. "Elena?" The name sounded foreign in her mouth. Elena took a breath. "Can I come in?" Her mother stepped aside. The house smelled the same. Fabric softener, coffee, and something metallic like rust and memory. Her father wasn't there. She didn't ask. They sat in the living room. The same beige sofa. Same doilies on the arms. Nothing had changed. Except Elena. There was a long silence. Then her mother spoke, voice small. "You look healthy." Elena gave a half smile. "I'm trying." Another pause. Her mother cleared her throat. "I've been worried. We've both been. We didn't know if you were safe." "Safe?" Elena repeated, her voice cracking with disbelief. "You mean like when I lived here? When I was 12 and you watched him throw my things out the window and said nothing?" Her mother flinched. "It wasn't that simple." "No," Elena interrupted, sharper now. "It never is it? Nothing was ever that simple." Her voice shook, not from fear, but from rage finally released. "I begged you. Every night. I begged you to stand up for me. To say something. To make it stop." Tears welled in her mother's eyes. "I was scared, Elena." "So was I," she screamed, finally standing. The room shrank around her. "You were the adult. You were supposed to protect me. And instead you made me believe I was the problem." Her mother reached for her hand, but Elena stepped back. "You don't get to touch me like that. Not anymore." Her voice was ice now. "There were days I prayed I wouldn't wake up. Nights I held a pillow to my face and tried to see how long I could go without breathing." Her mother sobbed. "Please don't say that. You don't get to silence me anymore." Her body was trembling now, her heart pounding like a war drum. "I left because if I stayed any longer, I would have disappeared. I would have become you, quiet, broken, obedient. A beat. And I would rather be alone than be you." Her mother looked up at her, face pale, mascara streaked. "I know I failed you. I know that. But you have to understand, he would have hurt me if I pushed back." Elena's lips curled. "But he did hurt me. And you let him." That silence again. Sharp. Hollow. Devastating. "I was a child, Mom. And no one came for me." She didn't expect an apology. She didn't come here to heal the past. She came to speak the truth out loud, in the place it was buried for years. That was enough. Elena straightened her shoulders and turned toward the door. But before she left, she said one last thing. You don't get to ask for forgiveness just because I finally escaped. You don't get to call me ungrateful because I chose myself. And if you ever want to be part of my life again, you'll have to face the parts of me you tried to erase. Then she walked out. The sun was setting as she reached the street. Golden light spilled across the sidewalk like spilled honey, warm, soft, forgiving. She breathed it in. She was still shaking, but it was a different kind of tremble now. Not fear. Not rage. Release. Later that night, Jasmine found her sitting by the window. Silent. Still. Glowing in the orange haze of dusk. You okay? Jasmine asked gently. Elena nodded slowly. I told her everything. How'd it feel? She stared into the horizon, like pulling out a knife I didn't know was still in my chest. They sat in silence for a long while. Then Jasmine whispered, I'm proud of you. Elena didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she whispered back, so am I. Becoming. The morning after the confrontation felt empty, but not the kind of empty that left her hollow. This was something new. It was the emptiness that came after the storm, when the wind had screamed its last, when the rain had wept everything clean. For the first time in years, Elena didn't wake up choking on dread. She didn't wake up with shame stitched into her skin. She just woke up. Alive. Unburdened. Reborn. Jasmine was already in the kitchen, humming to herself, dancing barefoot across the tiles. Elena watched her from the hallway for a long moment, soaking it in, the warmth, the safety, the simple beauty of someone who saw her not as broken, but as becoming. Morning, Jasmine smiled, sliding a mug of tea across the table. Sleep okay? Elena nodded. Better than I expected. She held the mug with both hands, breathing in the steam like it was holy. Jasmine sat down across from her, serious now. You don't have to talk about it. But if you want to, I'm here. Elena looked out the window, and for the first time since that day in the attic, she didn't feel afraid of her own voice. I thought confronting her would fix something, she whispered. Did it? Jasmine asked gently. No, Elena said. But it changed me. She swallowed. I didn't get an apology. I didn't get love. But I got myself back. That silence again. But now it felt like peace. Elena stared down at her hands. I spent so long thinking I had to earn love, to be good enough, quiet enough, small enough. Her voice wavered. But I'm done begging. I'm done shrinking. She met Jasmine's eyes. I don't want to survive anymore. I want to live. The words hung in the air like a vow. And Jasmine, eyes glassy, whispered, then let's build something new. They started with the little things. Elena began writing again, first in scraps, in half sentences, then in floods. She filled entire journals with the memories she had buried, and the dreams she was learning to believe in again. She started therapy. It hurt. God, it hurt. Digging through years of rot, naming the wounds, holding up mirrors she used to flinch from. But she kept showing up, because for the first time ever, she was doing it for herself. Weeks passed. Then months. Elena got a part-time job at a used bookstore. The smell of paper comforted her. Old stories. Second chances. The owner was kind. She didn't ask questions. Just smiled when Elena showed up early, stayed late, and organized every chaotic shelf like it was an act of worship. Elena found beauty in routine. Mornings were quiet. Afternoons were laughter. Evenings were filled with jasmine tea and slow, soft conversations on the couch. And her scars? They were still there. But they weren't ugly anymore. They were maps. Proof. History. One night, she sat alone on the rooftop. Stars blinking above her. Wind in her hair. She took a deep breath and whispered, I forgive you. Not to her mother. Not to her father. To herself. For staying too long. For believing their lies. For every time she said, I'm fine, when she was breaking inside. And in that moment something lifted. Not all the pain, but the power it held over her. She looked at her reflection days later, really looked, and saw someone she almost didn't recognize. Not because she looked different, but because she was standing tall. Eyes bright, back straight. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and came out made of light. One Sunday she visited the park, the one she hadn't dared return to since she left home. There was a little girl on the swings, hair flying, laughing so loud it cracked the sky. Elena watched her, watched the way her joy filled the air without apology. She felt something loosen in her chest. That girl, that used to be her. And maybe if she kept healing, kept choosing herself, she could find that girl again. Or better yet, become the woman that girl always needed. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Elena pulled out a small notebook. She scribbled on the first page, "I am not a victim. I am not a ghost. I am not what they tried to make me. I am becoming." She closed the book, heart steady. Tomorrow might still hurt. Memories might still echo. But she had reclaimed her voice, her body, her name. She had turned her pain into power. And now she would write the rest of her story on her own terms. The end. And still she rises. Not every story ends with a clean resolution. Not every wound closes without a scar. And not every survivor finds justice in the arms of the ones who hurt them. But this story, Elena's story, was never about them. It was about her. About the girl who was thrown out like garbage and still found her worth. About the woman who sat in silence for too long, and then finally screamed, "Enough!" About the soul who thought she was broken beyond repair, and yet, piece by piece, built herself back with trembling hands and relentless courage. She didn't get a happy ending handed to her. She created it, not by forgetting the past, but by owning it, by walking into the fire of her own pain, and coming out the other side alive, angry, and free. This is not a fairy tale. This is a reclamation, a voice, a body, a future. So to anyone watching this, who has ever felt small, silenced, or shattered, this story is for you. You are not what they did to you. You are not the version of yourself that pain tried to shape. You are more. You are becoming. And your story isn't over yet. It's just beginning.